There's a particular kind of quiet defeat that happens in a closet, not a bank statement. It's the moment you reach for a jacket you bought 8 months ago, the one that seemed like a smart decision at the time, $60 instead of $200, and you feel the zipper catch, again on fabric that's already starting to separate at the seam. You paid less. And somehow, standing there in a slightly torn jacket in the middle of winter, you don't feel like you won anything. This moment repeats itself constantly, in different forms, for almost everyone. And it's never framed as what it actually is, not a shopping mistake, but a trick your own mind plays on you every single time you compare a price tag to a future you cannot yet see. To understand why this keeps happening to smart, careful, financially conscious people, you have to understand what your brain is actually doing in the 3 seconds before you decide. When you stand in front of two versions of the same object, your brain isn't comparing the objects. It's comparing the only thing it can measure instantly: the number on the tag. Everything else, how long the material will hold, how the stitching will behave after the 20th wash, whether the sole will separate from the shoe by spring, none of that is visible. None of it is priced. It exists only as a probability. And probabilities are exhausting for a brain that would rather resolve the decision right now. So the price becomes the whole story. Economists call this anchoring, the tendency to fixate on the first clear number available and let it silently dictate the rest of the judgment. It isn't a flaw exclusive to careless people. It's simply what a brain does when it's handed one hard fact in a fog of uncertainty and asked to decide in 30 seconds standing in a fluorescent lit aisle. There's an old idea, sometimes called the boots theory, that captures this with brutal clarity. A person with money buys a pair of boots for $50. The leather is good. The stitching holds. 10 years later, the boots are still on his feet. A person without much money buys a pair for $10. They crack within a season. He buys another pair. And another. By the end of that same decade, he has spent significantly more than the man in the $50 boots, and he has also spent something the wealthier man never had to spend: time, effort. The low hum of frustration that comes from having to solve the same problem again and again. This isn't just an old parable. A widely cited apparel industry analysis found that clothing today is worn only 7 to 10 times on average before being discarded, a decline of roughly 36% over the past 15 years, driven largely by cheaper garments that fail faster and get replaced without a second thought. A 2023 Norwegian University of Science and Technology study tracking real household clothing use found something telling. Outerwear like coats and jackets, the category people tend to buy more carefully and hold on to, averaged 5 to 6 years of active use, more than double the roughly 2 years a cheap, frequently replaced item typically lasts. The cruelty of this isn't that cheap things break. It's that the cost of them breaking never arrives all at once. It arrives in installments, spaced out just far enough apart that no single moment ever feels like the moment you overpaid. Something else happens alongside the anchoring effect, and it's subtler. A single $200 purchase registers instantly as a real financial decision, something worth pausing over, maybe even sleeping on. But 5 separate $40 purchases, spread across a year, each one replacing something that just quietly failed, those don't register as a financial decision at all. They register as 5 small, forgettable inconveniences. Your mind evaluates them one at a time, in isolation, never adding them into the total they actually represent. The math is identical. The feeling is nothing alike. Underneath that sits a quieter problem still. You don't actually know what quality looks like, and neither does almost anyone else standing in that aisle with you. Judging whether something will genuinely last requires information that simply isn't available in the moment: how the materials perform after a year of real use, what the actual failure rate is, whether the extra $40 is buying you something real or just a nicer looking label. Price becomes a stand-in for all of that missing information, a shortcut standing in for knowledge nobody in the store actually has. Sometimes the shortcut is right. Often, it's just marketing wearing the costume of quality. Picture two people, side by side. each buying a winter coat on the same October afternoon. One spends $220 on something built to survive a decade of real winters and doesn't think about it again until the next decade arrives. The other spends $60, wears it through 2 winters before the lining gives out, replaces it, wears that one through 2 more winters before the same thing happens, and repeats this 5 times across the same 10 years. By the time a decade has passed, the second person has spent $300, nearly 40% more than the person who supposedly overpaid at the start, and has also absorbed 5 separate afternoons of shopping, 5 moments of mild irritation, 5 reminders that the last decision didn't quite hold up. None of this means expensive is always smarter. Sometimes a higher price buys nothing but a label and a markup, and the $60 version was genuinely the better decision. The trap was never about price itself. The trap is deciding using only the one number you can see, while ignoring the only question that actually determines what something costs you, not what you pay today, but what you'll have paid by the time it's finally, truly done. There's a reason this trap is so hard to notice from the inside. Every individual cheap purchase feels like a small, defensible win. Nobody stands at a checkout counter thinking I am about to make a financially irrational decision. They're thinking I found a good deal, and in the narrowest possible sense. They're right, the item in front of them really does cost less than the alternative. The irrationality doesn't live in any single purchase. It lives in the pattern that only becomes visible once you zoom out across a year or a decade and count. Most people never do that math, not because they're bad with numbers, but because nobody ever hands them the full receipt. Retailers show the price of the item in front of you. Nobody shows the price of the version of you that keeps buying it again. There is a way to catch this pattern before it repeats itself again. It isn't about becoming a more careful shopper in some vague general sense. It's about asking one specific question before the money leaves your hand. Not what does this cost, but what will this cost me? Per year, for as long as I actually use it. $200 stretched across 10 years is $20 a year. $60 replaced every 8 months is closer to $90 a year, nearly 5 times more expensive, hiding perfectly behind a smaller number on a smaller receipt. The gap is invisible until the moment you force yourself to calculate it. After that, it's very hard to unsee. This isn't limited to jackets and boots. The same math quietly plays out with furniture, kitchen appliances, headphones, even relationships with service providers. Anywhere a cheaper option promises the same result today, and a more expensive one promises to still be working next year. A blender that costs $30 and dies in 14 months isn't cheaper than one that costs $90 and lasts a decade. It just moves the real price into a future moment nobody bothered to calculate at checkout. The price tag was never lying to you. It was simply telling you the truth about today, and staying completely silent about every day after that. Saving money was never really about paying less in the moment. It was always about not having to pay for the same thing twice. Catching tricks like this one before they cost you twice is basically the whole point of this channel. More of this every week. So the next time your hand reaches for the cheaper version out of pure habit, pause for exactly 1 second longer than usual. And ask yourself honestly, am I actually saving anything here, or am I just agreeing, quietly, to pay for this twice?